Okay, it's time to talk about Dark Souls 2. The Dark Souls video made it clear to me that you're wrong. No, that's wrong. I'm not going to talk about how much I hate Dark Souls 2 because, well, that would be a lie. I like Dark Souls 2. I think there are absolutely great things in this game. If you'll remember my very brief comment about the game in my previous video,
except Dark Souls 2. Don't bother playing Dark Souls 2.
That's all I really said, and while I can't say you'll like my conclusion here because it's essentially the same, maybe I can explain myself a bit better and show that I'm not someone who just hates Dark Souls 2 for no reason. In fact, I don't hate it at all. When I say don't bother playing Dark Souls 2, that isn't me saying I don't like the game on a personal level. I may not watch 50 Shades of Grey, but anyone who's played FromSoft's games as much as I have is probably a masochist on some level. Getting ass fucked by a game is fun. I'd say I enjoy most of my time in Dark Souls 2, and I can see many people feel the same way. I will never shit on someone just for liking a game. Okay, well, most games. But generally, if you like something I don't, or hate something I like, then more power to you. However, enjoying a game is a totally different beast from a game being good. Some people enjoy challenging games. Some people enjoy relaxing games. Some people enjoy cultured adult entertainment. Everyone has different tastes, and while that's great, it, makes us human, it isn't exactly a barometer of quality. I'm not saying you shouldn't put your opinions in the comments, by the way, that's what the comment section's for. Dark Souls 2, I feel, is one of those games where no matter what stance you take, you're kinda screwed. If you say you like it, you'll be clowned on by the people that hate it, and if you say you don't like it, the people who do like it will clown on you in turn. There isn't really a middle ground when it comes to this game. As I already said, I like Dark Souls 2, but I wouldn't say it's a good game. Or, at the very least, I wouldn't generally recommend it. Now, my videos probably aren't the best if a review is what you're looking for. They're full of subjective takes, and I tend to hyperfixate on the elements to a game that I find to be either interesting or contentious. For example, I think I do a somewhat decent job of getting my point across in my Bioshock 2 video, and I was pretty mean. I killed Bioshock 2's dog and then I fucked its mother for good measure. But that video isn't really a great critique on the quality of Bioshock 2 as a game, which is fine with me. That's not really what I was going for. It isn't usually what I go for. I lack both the intelligence and writing talent to make genuine, objective analysis videos, but I will attempt to do so anyway. The first part of this video will be dedicated to quote-unquote objective arguments. Things that are factual statements about the game that can't really be argued against. The second part will go into subjective town, which will be more my personal opinions. And don't worry, I'll give credit where credit's due. Let's start with some obvious things. Snap points. Generally in the Souls games you can, move your character pretty freely. Where you point the stick, unless you use a mouse and keyboard like a fucking psycho, is where you go. Pretty bog standard and simple. In Dark Souls 2, however, there are snap points added to your movement. You don't move in whatever direction you point, you move in the direction of the nearest snap point to where you intended to go. Now, if I were to give my personal thoughts on this, I would say that this is a negative feature, but since I'm being objective in this section, I'll simply say that the addition of snap points fundamentally takes some amount of the player's control over their character. I think that's pretty inarguable. Whether it's good or bad is most definitely an opinion, though I'm sure even the most hardcore of Dark Souls 2 fans would probably agree with this being a negative. I'm pretty sure that if you edge the fuck out of your analog stick like your Pokemon's editor, you can technically get your character to move in between the snap points, but it isn't realistic to do so in combat, or in general. Another thing is the map design. I said in my last video that Dark Souls level design was its strongest feature, and I stand by that. The interconnected levels gave the world, and by extension the game, a sense of reality and purpose. It truly felt like whoever designed the world cared about it a lot. On a more objective note, because all that shit is personal, what it does do is force the developers to be thoughtful when it comes to the layout of the world. With no method for fast travel at the beginning of the game, the level designers needed to structure things in such a way that it wouldn't hinder the world's size, while also making traversal doable for the player. This resulted in the shortcuts and interconnectivity we see in the game. It's fine to say not having fast travel until you get the Lord Vessel can be irritating. Hell, I'd agree at times, but it's hard to deny that the lack of warp was what made the world of Dark Souls so well designed. The shortcuts and interconnectivity the game is known for wouldn't really matter otherwise, because the player would have no reason to use any of it. Which brings me along to Dark Souls 2. Dark Souls 2 has full warp from the start of the game, and I am by no means saying this is a bad thing, at least not on its own. There's a reason fast travel being enabled in full has become the standard for FromSoft's games. For example, taking a shit on its own isn't really a bad thing. But if you take a shit while Slav squatting over your CEO's steak dinner, well, that's a bit more problematic. Not having interconnectedness in Dark Souls 2 is fine. In my opinion, it's kind of boring, but objectively it's fine. The issue comes with the laziness this allows for. Okay, lazy is a strong word, so let's go with simplistic? None of the branching paths you take through the world really loop or connect, which is why primal bonfires were added. In Dark Souls 1, you explored in a fairly non-linear way, mostly just wandering around until you ran into a big motherfucker blocking your path. Meanwhile, in Dark Souls 2, you journey out, get teleported back to Majula, then repeat the process, at least for the first half of the game. And the second half of the game is even more straightforward, which, like I said, isn't necessarily a bad thing. Linearity can be a good thing just as much as non-linearity can be a bad thing. However, regardless of the reason behind it, this map was planned out by Mr. Bean. I mean, what else explains having the Iron Keep, a whole kingdom covered in and surrounded by magma, at the top of a goddamn lighthouse? Or the inconsistent relevant position of different locations making it painfully obvious that you're staring into a skybox? Sure, there are lots of times where Dark Souls levels make me want to write my own name in the Death Note, but at least that game makes sense. All the locations are positioned in ways that feel logical relative to each other, even not being able to just walk up to Anor Londo makes sense. Like, yeah, obviously they'd shut out the dank, musty, and disgusting Redditors, I mean undead. There's a relatively logical flow and structure to the world of Dark Souls, and while illogical things can still be well designed, the screw-ups in Dark Souls 2 could potentially be immersion-breaking for some players if they realize how paper-thin the facade of a grounded world is. Now notice I said could potentially right there, because obviously not every player will have that reaction, and it's impossible to say for sure unless I go out and question literally every single Dark Souls 2 player out there. And even then it wouldn't be completely objective. I mean, what if someone lied? However, I do think it's fair to say that a not insignificant amount of players could have potentially experienced this. I think that's a profoundly safe thing to say, but hey, I've been wrong before. Last big objective thing is the hitboxes. Now, though FromSoft have definitely improved over time, the hitboxes in their older games are far from perfect. It's one of my biggest issues with the beast bosses in Bloodborne. Some of them are as tight as a tourniquet, while others are looser than your mother at her high school reunion. I do need to emphasize that all of FromSoft's games, particularly the ones that came out before Dark Souls 3, have this issue to some extent. However, this doesn't mean it isn't a problem in Dark Souls 2. It doesn't do much good to explain bad hitboxes, so I'll just let the flight logs speak for themselves. As you can see, some of these are frankly ridiculous. Even Sir Alan, one of the best bosses in the game, has this issue. It isn't universal across the game, some of the hitboxes are great, but the inconsistency can potentially be off-putting and irritating, especially when combined with the unreliable netcoding of the PvP, which I don't even need to get into. All of the Souls games have terrible PvP in my eyes anyway. Hopefully these things can help you see where I'm coming from when I say don't bother playing Dark Souls 2. And this is without bringing up life gems, adaptability, enemy spam and ambushes, or the bloated boss roster. On a very basic technical level, Dark Souls 2 is a bad game. And now that I've probably lost 70 to 80% of you, those who remain get to listen to the subjective part of the video. Life gems. Yeah, we're starting here. Interestingly enough, I actually don't think life gems are all that bad in concept. A consumable, limited use item that restores health slowly over time. I also think it's a cool idea that you can use them preemptively before engaging if you think you're likely to take damage. The problem doesn't stem from the life gems as an item, rather the problem is how easy it is to stack these bitches up like paper, both of which help to declare to the world how unimpressive your 2-inch destroyer really is. It's been said that you have effectively infinite health as long as no single attack or potentially combo can kill you, which is technically true. Demon Souls had a similar problem with grass. Infinite healing or infinite health isn't inherently wrong, but I don't think it's something that belongs in Dark Souls. Part of what makes the games challenging is the fact that you can only screw up so many times before you die. After a while, the game basically says, alright, you aren't good enough, and throws you backwards with a disappointed look on its face. Now, if you're anything like me, this just feels like a conversation with your parents, but if you aren't like me, thank your lucky stars, it might fill you with a determination to improve and push forward. Or it might piss you off and make you uninstall the game. That's fine, Dark Souls really isn't for everyone. However, I still firmly believe that this is a preferable alternative to infinite healing, which completely undermines the challenge of managing your resources. Like I said, I don't think life gems are inherently problematic, but the fact that they're cheaply and infinitely sold really close to the start of the game is. Adaptability. Honestly, I feel like this is the one complaint no one would really argue with. No one likes dumping level points into something that was given to you freely in the other games as part of the core combat system. And it's made worse by the fact that the game isn't clear on what ADP even does. According to the Dark Souls fan wiki, ADP is known to improve iframes, improve Estus drinking speed, improve all status defenses, improves poise effectiveness, improves poison attack power, and minimally raises your HP. And what does it say in the game?
You what?
What the fuck? This basically tells you nothing in relation to what the stat even does. Agility says it boosts ease of evasion, which is not something most new players would likely take to mean we gave you less invincibility frames, so now you have to waste level points to earn them back, bitch. And nowhere, anywhere in the game does anything even hint that it speeds up using the Estus flask. This has to be one of the most poorly communicated mechanics I've ever seen in a video game. And again, even if it was perfectly defined in a way that clearly showed what this stat affected, it would still be ass, because being forced to use your level ups to acquire full use of a mechanic which is integral to the core combat system and was rightfully provided to you in the previous games isn't something most people will appreciate. Like I said, this is the point that I really don't see many people arguing against because it's pretty indefensible. Now, based solely on what I've said so far in this video, it would be very easy to think that I hate this game. Please keep in mind that I'm explaining why I wouldn't recommend playing Dark Souls 2, not why I don't like it. I do not make videos on games I hate. Also, one of the commenters on the Dark Souls video encouraged me to appreciate the good things the game has to offer. So before I talk about enemy placement and bosses, here are some things I like about Dark Souls 2. Majula. Undoubtedly my favorite hub area in any of the Souls games, though the Hunter's Dream is a close second. The gorgeous overlook, Rule 34, and the lonely, wistful music all give the place such a unique feeling and atmosphere. One of the best ideas that I really wish was used in other games, bonfire aesthetics. God, I fucking love farming the rotten for souls. The art direction. Don't get me wrong, all of FromSoft's work tends to have amazing art direction, but it's still awe-inspiring in Dark Souls 2, particularly areas like the Dragon Eyrie and Drangleic Castle for me. Same goes for the lore. Again, all of FromSoft's games have great lore, though Bloodborne's is my favorite, but that doesn't take away from Dark Souls 2's story. I said in my Dark Souls video that I prefer the story of the first game because it has more subtlety, but I still do appreciate the tale of King Vendrick, Nashandra, and the Kingdom of Drangleic. Listen, I know I've been hard on Dark Souls 2 this video, and if I make any more videos on FromSoft games, I'll be hard on them too, but it isn't because I hate them or want other people to hate them. I'm hard on FromSoft's games because, weirdly enough, I care. I think it's important to be able to call out the problem something has, even if it's something you have an attachment to, especially if it's something you have an attachment to. Enemy placement.
I hate your face.
Okay, I know some people might say, wait, shouldn't this be in the objective part of the video? Well, maybe, but I didn't want to put it there for a reason. Your experience might be different, but from my playtime in both versions of the game, this is more of a Scholar of the First Sin problem than a Dark Souls 2 problem. Not to say the base game has no issues with enemy placement, because it sure as shit does, as do all FromSoft games at times, but the definitive edition was where I felt it was really cranked to offensive levels. In fact, I actually started out with the Scholar version, so playing the original felt like a sigh of relief at times because I would expect to see enemies and instead have an empty room or something like that. One of the best examples of this problem is in the Iron Keep on the run up to the Smelter Demon fight. Once you cross the bridge, you've got an enemy right in front of you and an archer on each of your sides. This already sucks, but it gets worse. I hope you go for the Fog Wall Archer first, because otherwise your holes are gonna get resized and you aren't gonna like it. Well, don't worry, things will be penetrating you anyway. When you go for the Far Archer, I should mention the archers can be tough enemies in their own right if you don't have the damage to kill them right away. The goddamn TMNT drops in from just outside the ionosphere to test out their new sounding rods. What will become immediately clear when playing through this game is that it is designed to kill you. It's been said that one of the biggest issues with Dark Souls 2 is that it focused too much on difficulty just for difficulty's sake, instead of creating balanced and fair challenges with oppressive odds that feel amazing to overcome. More often than not, when I finally push through something in Dark Souls or Bloodborne or Elden Ring, I'm left with this feeling of... But in Dark Souls 2, when I do something similar, I usually just think, thank fuck that's over. And it's encounters like this one that give off those impressions. Are there unbalanced parts of Dark Souls and Bloodborne and Elden Ring? Absolutely yes. But it never feels spiteful. Dark Souls 2 feels spiteful, like it has a vendetta against you because you had the nerve to play it. I guess difficulty's easy to market. You know what else is easy to market? Bosses. Dark Souls 2 has 32 bosses without DLC, and it goes without saying that Scholar has 33. This is in the subjective section because thoughts on bosses can differ greatly from person to person. For instance, a lot of people seem to like Velstat's fight. I personally think the fight's pretty bland. His moves are easy to dodge, he has a power-up that lets you shave off an assload of his health, and he's not aggressive or fast enough to make it tough to find healing windows. But hey, that's just my thoughts on that fight, hence this being in the subjective section. I feel it's more commonly accepted than not that the overall boss quality of Dark Souls 2 is a step down from other Souls games, which I'm more than willing to agree with. I think even Demon Souls has better bosses. However, I do appreciate the various attempts to add twists to many of these fights, even if they're hit or miss. You can remove the poison from the Baneful Queen's arena, you can remove the Fume Knight's ability to heal, you can light up the arena of the Lost Sinner, stuff like that. Like I said, it's hit or miss, but I still like the effort and variety, and I appreciate what they're going for. Overall, this game has too many stinker boss fights too often. Sure, there are great ones like Smelter Demon, Sir Alon, Fume Knight, the Pursuer, Sin, the Lost Sinner, the Looking Glass Knight, and Burnt Ivory King, but you've also got many more along the lines of the Royal Rat Vanguard, the Royal Rat Authority, Dragon Rider, Dragon Riders, Duke's Freya, Prowling Magus and the Congregation,
Spooky, scary skeleton.
clones you paid extra for of a boss that you also paid extra for, Ancient Dragon, Guardian Dragon, Covetous Demon, the list goes on. I'm not going to spend too much time on bosses since A, like I already said, it really comes down to the person for a lot of them, and B, as I said in my Dark Souls 3 video, I don't think bosses are as important as people make them out to be. Don't go back and watch it though, it's got my ugly ass face in it. I said towards the beginning of the universe that my videos aren't really meant to be reviews, at least not most of the time. Sure, I like starting discussions and giving my thoughts on different things, but I don't end my videos with, this game gets a blank out of 10 from me, because I'm not really qualified to make that call. With that being said, I still account for the possibility that one of my videos could potentially sway someone's opinion on whether or not to purchase a game. I also try to understand that while $20, $40, or even $60 on a game might not be a lot to everyone, to a lot of people that's a decent chunk of change. So yes, broadly speaking, I wouldn't recommend Dark Souls 2 for most people. That doesn't mean I don't like it doesn't mean you can't like it, and it doesn't mean you won't like it. But if I had to give a blanket statement, that's what it would be. For instance, alright, now everyone can laugh at me. I play Destiny 2.
You serious?
Yes, I am a depraved individual, just ask your mother. Would I recommend Destiny 2? God no. It's essentially a card reader disguised as a video game. It's a pay-to-win Amazon for MMO heads designed to fleece as much money as possible from the, quite frankly, devout and dedicated player base that it doesn't fucking deserve. Do not play this game. Oh, but the final shape was so good. Shut up. Content-wise, yes, the final shape is great, probably the best Destiny expansion ever, but its story is honestly too little too late and falls short of Witch Queen, which, for the record, wasn't even that good of a campaign. It was just good compared to the rest of Destiny's campaigns, but if that's your bar for story-driven single-player experiences, maybe you should lift it off of the concrete foundation that it's currently resting on. I enjoy Destiny 2 personally because my inner circle of friends plays it. Believe me, if it were my choice, we'd all be on Final Fantasy XIV right now. Fuck, even WoW might be better than this. I have fun with Destiny and I play it, but I also acknowledge that for most people it's not a game they should invest the time or money into because of everything I just fucking said. Listen, you can like things that aren't good. You do like things that aren't good, as do I. Destiny 2 and Dark Souls 2 are drops in a bucket in terms of how much shit I'm willing to swallow. I should be clear, Dark Souls 2 is not comparable to Destiny 2 whatsoever. Sure, Scholar of the First Sin was scummy as fuck, but at least I don't get a fucking pop-up ad every time I want to carve my way through Drangleic. I don't hate Dark Souls 2. I like Dark Souls 2, but it has a lot of issues. It has a lot of things that a lot of people, most people in my opinion, will find off-putting. And when I make a remark like don't play Dark Souls 2, that's just me trying to take all that into account. It's fine if you like Dark Souls 2, hell, I'm right there with you, but for most people I wouldn't recommend it. There are better ways to spend $40. If I were to recommend a Souls game to someone who has never touched these games before, it would probably be Dark Souls 3, since it's probably the most straightforward Souls game out there, at times to its detriment, but it means a new player has little chance of being lost or confused, which isn't the case in Dark Souls 1. Regardless, if you somehow made it all the way to the end, I appreciate it. I had to delay this one by a week, partially because life suddenly got busy for a while, and admittedly, I've been consumed by Shadow of the Erdtree. I haven't finished it yet as of writing this, but so far, it's incredible. I'll probably make a video on Elden Ring at some point because I have a lot of things to say about it, but it'll be a while. Topic for next video is kinda up in the air, but I'll be taking a break from talking about FromSoft for a bit, despite the temptation to keep going. Whatever it is, I hope it will be back to 2 weeks. I'll see you then, and thank you for watching.